I didn't really have a dog in this fight, obviously, in Virginia, but I was following it because it could be an indicator of which way things are going to go in the future. And this was really bizarre to see the media meltdown for one main reason. And I think it'd be good for... This actually might be good for the right. I know the right tends to blow their opportunities, but this might actually be good because this is kind of a self-own what they're doing. Because the issue was education. A lot of stuff they didn't like that was being taught. McAuliffe tried the 9/11 strategy, where it didn't matter what the question was, or what it was, he just kept saying racism and Trump, like, every 5 seconds, which I was like, that's not addressing what people are saying. You know what I'm talking about? The 9/11 strategy from Family Guy? I'm sure you know the clip.
Mrs. Griffin, what are your plans for cleaning up our environment?
9/11.
This was bizarre because, you know, he's like crony establishment Clintonite, not answering questions, just constantly trying to ride on Trump, and it's like, dude, he's gone. Let it go. And then that caused a lot of Biden voters, because this is a blue state, Biden voters to go, I'm going to pick the other guy because this guy won't answer any questions. Right? So we have like these, probably a lot of them shit libs. You probably have a lot of neo-libs, and then probably some standard Democrats, like 90s Democrats, right? And they probably voted for the other guy. And then they turn on the news. They're probably those people that just get drowned out with you know, the corporate media brain rot, only to turn on their favorite news station and hear, you're a racist and a bigot. And I'm like, you're attacking your own. You realize, like, the big portion of that the voters for Youngkin were Democrats that were just sick of this shit. And now you're calling them racists and phobes and is. I'm like, okay, interesting strategy. Let's see what happens. So we gotta look at this because this is fucking amazing. I love this meltdown.
Glenn Youngkin played the race card for a reason because he knows it works on certain white voters.
He did.
But he didn't, though. That was the other way around. It was every question. It was like, how are we going to deal with this? Racism and Trump. That didn't answer my question. Racism, Trump. It's sort of the same thing like a lot of Democrats, you know, tend to do with like black people. Like, we care about systemic racism. We care about these things. We want to help your community. We hear you. Vote for us. All right, we voted for you. Now, can we do something about qualified immunity? Nigga, look at the BLM sign. See? Look, we care. Okay, but what about the qualified immunity? Look at the statue. Got you the Floyd statue. You see what I mean? It always tends to be them that do that. It's not really a right way. The right doesn't really do that. When they're just not into something, they just straight up say it.
Did stoke white grievance politics to mobilize the Republican base.
He's lawn.
I love that. The white grievance I was like, a lot of these were Democrats that just didn't like this dude. So I'm like, this is kind of a self-own. That's what I meant by this is such a bizarre attack angle, because I'm like, now you've got a lot of either default Democrats or shit libs who are turning on their favorite media source, who's now berating them as racists. I don't get, what is your goal here? But then again, these people all suffer from what I call algorithmic brain rot, and sort of like the rise of, like, they bring up here of like ideas like CRT and intersectionality tend to have came from internet media algorithms. And they noticed all these buzzwords that come with these two things tend to generate a lot of money. And so when they say these things, they get more views and more promotion, even if what they're saying makes no fucking sense, and they're just trying to hit buzzwords for the algorithm, so it creates nonsense. And I always call that algorithmic brain rot. And the mainstream media pick this up because they get tons of money off of it.
Trump's really sort of disgusting, flagrant out racism. He's wrapped it in education.
Education, right, which is code for white parents don't like the idea of teaching about race.
That's
again attacking Dems. Now I get that. Here's the thing: there's a partial truth in that, but for the most part, I was like, "What? What are you talking about?" And now they're going back to Trumpism. Why does the left never fucking define Trumpism? Why do they always make it like super vague? Like, every time I ask, what does Trump is, I always get this weird, different answer every time. Like, no one can tell me what it is. It just seems like they need his name for money. You know, just to scare people into doing certain things. Like, he's gone. It's not gonna work. Shut up, computer. He's gone. It's not gonna work.
The fundamental problem for these parents and this anti-CRT movement. They don't like the way whiteness is being portrayed in these new, more inclusive lessons.
I don't even know what that means. Oh, whiteness. I always found this interesting when they would say whiteness and blackness, and then we say, no, it's not attached to a race, it's about this thing. And then it's like, no, it's about this thing, but then it's attached to race again somehow, and I never understood. Again, like I said, when you argue with leftists, this is the most annoying thing they ever fucking do. They never define everything, they keep everything vague, and that's so if you try to hold them to a standard, they can pivot and go, well, that's not what I meant, this is what I meant, and this is the stuff I'm talking about. Vague things that don't mean anything. And a lot of this had to do with, like, education, and again, you have, like, the CRT thing, and I get my, like, the right doesn't even know how to attack that issue, because it's, the semantic games, and when you get semantic games into law, it's really ridiculous. But they always disguise it, we want to teach the history of racism. That's fine, okay? I get it. Some people are not gonna like that. I understand. The right doesn't fucking understand even what CRT is. They'll call everything fucking CRT. Any sort of racial topic they don't like, they call CRT. I know, the right does that. They get overly hyperbolic. But then I always look at it, and then they'll take writings from these people and then extrapolate it to F Whitey and get Whitey, and I'm like, why are you doing that? How does that help? And even when we have the black ignorance and do that, I can't. That is annoying, because I'm like, how is that going to help anybody? Right? You want certain things for your community. You want to make you want to make progress and everything. But I'm gonna say I'm out to get 68% of the country, and you're just gonna pit them against each other. That's not gonna end well. Why would you do that? Like I said, it just doesn't make any sense. But then again, none of this shit makes any sense.
This wasn't about those pocketbook issues. This was about how white kids feel talking about what black kids go through.
I don't even know what the fuck that meant.
Subtext of all this was, we can't let these black and brown people run the country.
Again, this is a lot of these people were standard Democrats, mainstream media initiated Democrats, who again are now turning on their favorite news show and calling them racist. Okay. All right, we'll see how that works out for you.
Youngkin running on critical race theory that he knew hit a chord around race.
I think all this CRT stuff is trumped up dog whistling.
Some of it.
There we go. Like Trump dog whistling. So you're saying that, again, a portion of your base were secret racists and they just needed to hear these dog whistles from, like, Trumpian style figures? I'm gonna say, if you want to break people out of this, like, mainstream media matrix, left or right, this is how you do it. They'll self-own themselves eventually. There's two ways it could go. Either they're going to make them feel guilty and vote back the other way, or they're going to break out of this and go, wait, what the hell? I don't care about race. I just wanted education addressed. There's weird stuff being taught in the schools. And then you go, nope, you're racist. And they go, okay, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to vote for the other guy. Whoever it is, 2022, 2024, I don't care. I'm done with these people. That's what I said. Good job. You know, self-own yourself like that. Great.
Was dog whistle racism.
The dog whistle messaging that you saw Youngkin engage in during the course of the campaign.
CRT is in the latest line of school busing, crosstown busing, welfare queen.
What the fuck are you talking about? That's the algorithmic brain rot I'm talking about. I'm like, what? How are those comparable, and what does that have to do with anything? That's what I'm talking about. It's like when you read some of the stuff they're taught in schools, you can tell the algorithmic brain rot got into that too. Because I've read some of the stuff they put in the younger schools, and I was like, none of what they're saying is making any fucking sense, no matter what way you spin it, or it either begs the question, or it puts in assertion, or it assumes certain premises are already true with the questions. Maybe if I can find the book pages, I could go through that in a video and why these make no sense. Because it is pretty hilarious, and then you find out it's being taught in schools and it's not hilarious anymore.
you have it is in that same line, and you saw it in the results in Virginia.
This more palatable Republican who still uses the same racist themes that Trump did. He just packaged them in a soccer dad sweater vest model.
He's found a way to launder a pretty racist trope, this idea that we cannot talk about America's history because it hurts my feelings.
I can at least give that there's some truth to that, but I don't think that was the issue. It wasn't that it was teaching history. It was the F. Whitey stuff that people don't like. Right? I already know, because I've seen how the right tries to ban CRT, which I don't get why the left keeps saying it doesn't exist, and then simultaneously when the right tries to ban it, they go, no. I'm like, I thought it doesn't exist. Which is dumb, because I've even, like, you can get the textbooks, okay? Like, I've read part of them. But like I will say, I was like, the right doesn't know how to attack the CRT issue, so what they do is they'll be like, we're banning divisive topics, and then they have this list of topics that's very broad, and when you look at all the topics you ban, you're like, wait, you can't talk about this in history, but this is actually American history. Right, like certain things. But that's because the right doesn't really know. There's some people on the right who know what it is, but most people on the right don't know what it is. It's like you bring up something about race, and they'll screech CRT, it doesn't matter what it is. Right, like if you wanted to do some sort of Black history curriculum or something in school, which schools definitely need more of, but if you were to do that, and I went in there and say, the Negro may have been God's gift to America to save its soul. Paraphrase, I got that right. The right would probably scream CRT. Like, that's MLK, actually. Because the problem is, it's not that they're actually teaching at schools because they're doing a technically the truth, that they're not. But they're like integrating parts of it into other things. So it, like I said, that's why it's a technically the truth. Because a lot of CRT stuff I've read, it's like they'll take two like truths. They play two truths and a lie. They'll start from truthful premises and then extrapolate over to weird stuff. They'll take an aspect of American history and racism that was true, and certain institutions that were founded with race in mind, that is true, that do pile down the road, which is true, and then they bring it to some weird stuff. Then they always bring it to the F or get whitey stuff, right? That's where I'm like, okay, you've lost me at that point. That's where I'm like, that's not the solution. You're just going to piss off most of the country, and you're going to make a racial divide even worse, where, again, you're going to have the left exacerbating it like fucking crazy, and the right just trying to ignore it, because they never want to address those issues.
He's turned that into a campaign.
White voters do have anxiety about a changing America, right? That it is blacker, it is browner.
You've got the Republicans yelling like, hey, look, the black and brown folks are coming for us.
Again, massive chunk of Democrats voted for Youngkin just because, and what's his name, Terry would not fucking address the education issue. So again, good job. You're probably breaking people out of the mainstream media, matrix. Hopefully they don't go the other direction and just go to Fox News instead, and then just go back into it, and just from a right-wing perspective. Hopefully it makes them look into independent sources, or maybe multiple sources as well as mainstream media, because that's what I do. I watch everything. I have a job. I can be at home, I have my headphones on all day, so I'm in news 24/7. But like I said, I have that luxury of time to listen to everybody all over the political spectrum.
Republican candidates are perfectly willing to use race as a motivating factor for their base. That has gone on for decades, and it happened this year.
Race is...
Wait, no, that's literally the left. That's what they do. They motivate everything through race. The right's problem is that they won't address any racial issues. I've always said, if you brought a liberal and a conservative and sat them down in a room and said, we are going to talk about the race issue, the liberal would screech incoherently and the conservative would just walk out of the room. Right? One side just doesn't even want to deal with it. They just want to sweep it under the rug, not talk about it. And the other side is like a bunch of shit libs who are just spouting absolute nonsense that makes no sense, and injecting race into things where that's actually not the driving factor. And then in things that are, they'll exaggerate it or take it to somewhere stupid, to which then the right will latch onto it and attack. They'll attack the stupidity of the left instead of the actual argument about fixing certain structural racism issues, right? It's sort of like how the white liberals will grab the black ignorant, who will say reparations about getting back at whitey and their ancestors. And I'm like, that is not what the argument is about. But when you bring somebody who knows the argument into it, the right's already going to latch on to the black ignorant and attack that. Right? And they won't address the guy who knows about it. Because it's not about white versus black. It's about, slave descendants versus the federal government. It's a totally different thing. Like I said, this is how they do it. Like I said, the left drives race, the right just wants to shove it under the rug and not talk about it.
Just the most palpable tool in the toolkit. It used to be of the Democratic Party back in the day when there were Dixiecrats, and now of the Republican Party.
This is about the fact that a good chunk of voters out there are okay with white supremacy. Let's call a thing a thing. Actually, scratch that. They are more than okay.
All right, you just called a chunk of your base white supremacists. I'm sure that will end well, and I'm sure they won't eventually backlash and say, fuck these people. And they might spite vote the other way, which again, I've said you shouldn't do, but I'm just saying how politics works. People vote on emotion more than policy, more than reason. They want to vote on emotion. And if you come in and say, everyone who voted this way is basically a white supremacist or a white supremacist complacent, they're going to look at you and go, what the fuck? I've been voting for you for like ever, and this one time you're just, now all of a sudden I'm the people you said that I should hate and I have hated, and then they're going to start to go like, wait, maybe they're not like that, and then, sort of, like I said, break out of the mainstream media narrative. The people who only watch the mainstream sources. Again, hopefully they go to independent sources and don't just do the backlash effect you see a lot of people do, which is where they go in the exact opposite direction. Like you see Christians that are abused by churches and then they just go full-blown atheist just because of a bad experience with the church, and then they extrapolate that. Let's just hope these people don't replace CNN, MSNBC with like Fox News, Newsmax, and OAN, because then you're just becoming the same thing in reverse. But okay, I'm really gonna enjoy to see how this strategy plays out. I'm sure it will end well. Good work, Dems. Let's see how this plays out.